There was once a young artist who loved a princess, a beautiful and proper princess that seemed all but unattainable to the bravest of knights. One day the artist decided that he must win the princess's affections, as he could not suffer loving her from afar any longer. The artist decided then and there to become a knight. Unfortunately, the artist didn't realize his plan was flawed, as it is nearly impossible to be something you are not. As you can imagine, the artist quickly learned he did not fit in with the other knights. Despite this setback, the artist was dedicated to his choice and determined to win the heart of his fair princess. The artist made the best of his situation and embraced his mastery of the brush. One by one he cut down the other knights and found himself square in front of his princess. The knightly artist had won the day, or so he had thought, and immediately asked his princess for her hand in marriage. The princess was so overcome with joy that any passer-by would safely assume that this will surely be the happy ending to their story. That would be a lovely story to tell you, my friends. Unfortunately, the artist who wrapped himself in his best intentions had made a great mistake. Not being oneself is quite a tricky act to maintain, after all, and being a knight is very hard work. For a time, things were wonderful, and the princess's love was sweet as nectar from the brightest of flowers. The artist was anxious to provide for his princess, and unfortunately, his meager home and belongings just never seemed enough for his fair lady. The princess always dreamed of living in a knight's great castle, and over time, the princess became unhappy, so the artist decided to build a bigger home. The artist worked hard, and still the princess was unhappy. The princess's sadness was contagious, and the artist found himself lost in his efforts to make his lady's dream come true. Convinced he was a knight, he worked harder and built the house ever bigger for his lady's love. Eventually, all the work on the artist's house became too much to manage, so the artist hired a young goblin to become his squire and help him with his work. The goblin was a very hard worker and quite smart. His only downfall was a furious temper. Occasionally, the artist would witness the goblin's fierce tantrums, and he would try to help the goblin overcome his anger with meditation and stress-relieving techniques. The goblin was quite skeptical of the lessons, but appreciated the gesture, and the two became fast friends. Unfortunately, the princess did not care for goblins. She grew more frustrated with the artist, as the walls were not tall enough, the windows were not wide enough, and the roof not round enough. The castle did not match her childhood dream, which upset her greatly. By now, the artist rarely saw his princess. She was very unhappy and would spend days wandering the halls of the castle the artist had built. The artist had decided that enough is enough. He must do something to show his love for his fair lady above and beyond building her this dream castle. That very night, the artist set off into the castle to find his princess. He had not realized how long it had been since he had actually entered his home. It is as if a maze lay out before him. How could this have happened? Asked the artist. Where could she possibly be? The artist wandered for what felt like ages before he stopped for a rest, and that is when he saw it, a letter on a desk. Opening the letter, he found a note from his princess. She had found another and left the castle to be happy with her new knight. She wished the artist well and thanked him for his kindness, but their marriage was now over. The artist, understandably, was overcome with sadness and anger. His temper raged while he yelled and screamed, "I am no knight! I don't want a castle! I am none of these things!" And the artist raged because he finally realized that the life he had pursued for so long was not his life. It was the life for his princess. As he accepted this cruel fate, he became angrier and worked himself into a much greater tantrum. It's hard to tell how long this tantrum lasted, as the artist was understandably quite upset. All we know is that it lasted for quite some time and only ended when the artist was visited by an unlikely friend. You see, the goblin had stopped by for a visit. When he heard the horrible hollering, he decided to investigate. Upon seeing the artist in such a state, the goblin decided he must help his friend, as he had once helped him with his anger. The goblin stepped forward and led the artist in his meditations, and in this moment of clarity, the artist realized that he had become something different. As a knight, he gave his best effort despite the costs. He had faith in those around him, even when others may have had doubts, and he was a fearless creative who would tackle on any project. Although he was never much of a traditional knight, he realized that his calling was higher. Building great castles means nothing if the people around you cannot build a simple house. Yes, there was this very moment when everything changed for our young artist friend. His heart no longer ached, and he found himself full of purpose. From that very moment forward, the artist set about tearing down the castle he worked so hard to create. Instead, he worked closely with any who would want to learn to build their own home. The artist took all the tools and materials he could salvage from the tremendous castle and used them to help build a stronger community. Within this effort, the artist found great satisfaction and, dare I say it, did the unthinkable. He became something new. However, this was not like becoming a knight. He knew this because for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing what he was meant to do. The end.